Welcome back to KOENIGSEGG'S DAGBOK and welcome to episode 6 where we'll be talking about the KOENIGSEGG CCXR lineup. And the CCXR lineup was in fact the first ever biofuel focused supercar, and in fact one of the first ever in the automotive industry to focus on an environmental approach. And this thing could run on E85 or E100 or ethanol fuel. This thing could also run on normal pump fuel. But nevertheless, this thing had that environmental approach which other car marques hadn't even thought of going forth for, but Koenigsegg decided to go for it, and this thing delivered on the aspects of performance and handling, because this thing although looks similar to that of the CCX, it has got minute changes, but nevertheless that put out, the CCX edition put out 888 horsepower, which is the most powerful before the CCXR lineup came out. And the CCXR was powered by the same 4.8 liter remapped twin supercharged V8, and this thing pitched 1018 brake horsepower and generated 1060 Nm of torque. And back then this was actually manufactured from 2007 to 2009, and during that time the only road legal car to cross the 1000 horsepower threshold was the Bugatti Veyron. And this thing is already more powerful than the Bugatti Veyron and way more track focused as well, not to mention that this thing was lighter as well. Obviously dihedral Synchro-helix doors, duh. And the fact that only 9 of these were ever made makes it even more rare, and you could get it with either a 6-speed manual or a 6-speed sequential manual as well, because race car. And this thing could accelerate from 0 to 62 miles an hour in 3.1 seconds, and this thing topped out at over 250 miles an hour or over 400 kilometers an hour without the rear wing, of course. And this thing generated 350 kilograms of downforce. Wow, completely carbon fiber body as well, Kevlar reinforced, and this thing could in fact accelerate from 0 to 200 kilometers an hour in 8.9 seconds, and this thing could accelerate from 0 to 200 kilometers an hour and back to 0 in 13.7 seconds. Some phenomenal numbers boasting right there, over 1000 horsepower of course, but when you put in the normal pump fuel, this thing could only produce 808 horsepower. It could only produce 1018 horsepower on ethanol, E85 or E100 fuel. But nevertheless, the fact that a Go Green initiative supercar or hypercar as we consider it now, the fact that it put out over 1000 horsepower and basically was more powerful than the Bugatti Veyron makes it even more bonkers. And as I said, only 9 made, production run from 2007 to 2009, a proper engineering marvel. But this isn't the only CCXR that they designed. They in fact designed 3 more, and those are the limited series run cars. And there are in fact 3 as I said right now, and we'll be talking about them right now. And the first one of them was this, the Koenigsegg CCXR edition, of which only 4 were ever made across the entire world, and only 1 was configured in the right hand drive configuration, thereby making it a 1 of 1. And the CCXR edition was basically a track focused variant of the already bonkers CCXR, and this thing had the same 4.8 liter twin supercharged V8, i.e. the flex fuel engine that ran on ethanol, and with ethanol in the tank, this thing could boast 1018 brake horsepower, and it could also generate 1060 Nm of torque. And in terms of power to weight ratio, aerodynamic balance, downforce and chassis stiffness, the CCXR edition was completely unrivaled, and that is because, as I said guys, a power to weight ratio which was unrivaled, which I'm not lying about, because this thing put out 1018 brake horsepower and it weighed in at 1280 kilograms. No other car marquee or no other hypercar had ever come as close, and back in the time of 2008, which was when this was released, it was a complete marvel back then, and Koenigsegg really pulling out some proper breathers. And this thing, as I said, a beautiful track focused weapon, a proper bare carbon fiber body, unique side winglets, unique 11 spoke wheels as well as a unique rear wing, and this thing had a complete chassis and suspension setup such that it could absorb the most uneven surfaces unlike any other hypercar, and it had a lower chassis with the inclusion of modified shock absorbers, stiffer springs as well as anti-roll bars. And this thing, as I said, that flex fuel engine as well, dihedral Synchro-helix doors, a hardtop which you could remove and stow in the front, thereby making it a convertible. And this thing also could accelerate from 0 to 62 miles an hour or 100 kilometers an hour in 2.9 seconds. And it could also accelerate from 0 to 124 miles an hour or 200 kilometers an hour in 8.75 seconds. But wait, the real party stopper is the 0 to 186 mile an hour or 300 kilometers an hour and back to 0, which he did in 25.5 seconds. Damn. And without the rear wing, this thing could hit a top speed of over 250 miles an hour or over 400 kilometers an hour. So this thing was a proper unicorn, and this is actually the final ever Koenigsegg to feature a 6-speed manual. And to be honest, back then this was a complete marvel. The fact that it put out over 1000 horsepower, a manual gearbox at the hand, rear wheel drive, this thing was a proper track focused weapon, and only 4 ever made, so of course a proper unicorn in its own. And this was actually the final ever analog, or one of the final analog modern classic hypercars, because after the CCXR edition, Koenigsegg descended into the paddle shift era and the 6-speed manual was completely abandoned. So the CCXR edition is definitely a proper marvel with over 1000 horsepower going to the rear wheels, a 6-speed manual at the hand. So, well, what do you guys think? Leave it in the comments. And moving on to the second one, and that is this, the CCXR Trevita. And Trevita actually means 3 whites in Swedish, and that actually meant that 3 of these were commissioned to be built, but only 2 were built due to the excessive labor and the complexity that this took. And the party trick of the CCXR Trevita is in the 1018 brake horsepower. It is in the flex fuel engine. It is the fact that this is actually white or silver carbon that you guys see right here. That is not a paint, guys. That is in fact carbon fiber. And Koenigsegg actually developed a complete solution, i.e. the Koenigsegg proprietary diamond weave, which they coated every single body panel with, and that transformed normal black carbon fiber, which in fact was highly regarded back in 2008, which was when this was created. It had a production run from 2008 to 2009, and normal carbon fiber on its own, especially for when crafting a hypercar, on its own was rated as high as possible. But Koenigsegg decided to up the level on that on its own, and they created the silver carbon fiber layout, and this thing looked the part. This thing is probably one of the best looking Koenigseggs to exist, is as well as expensive as well. I mean, this is probably one of the most complex carbon fiber works you'll ever see, and this thing is worth over $5 million right now. And of course, right now we've got the Koenigsegg naked carbon, which is basically normal carbon fiber, but every epoxy layer is sanded down to the weave. But nevertheless, back in 2008, Koenigsegg was pulling out bangers like this, and only 2 were made, making it a proper unicorn and making it as twice as rare as the CCXR edition. And this example is actually owned by Floyd Mayweather himself. It's got a beautiful white silvery finish, and when the Trevita hits the sunlight, it's like a million diamonds just sparkling at the same time. So this thing is a proper unicorn in its own, as good as it can be. I mean, looks wise, no one will even think twice about the fact that it has a flex fuel engine or 1018 brake horsepower. That is just added incentive for us. The main thing is the white silvery carbon fiber body, which just looks oh so good. I mean, just look at the difference next to the other Koenigsegg CCXR beside it. Wow, that is just a proper beauty to look at. Of course, it's got the same 4.8 liter twin supercharged flex fuel weight that puts out 1018 brake horsepower and 1060 Newton meters of torque, and it's got a top speed of over 250 miles an hour or over 400 kilometers an hour without the rear wing. And it's also got a couple more unique features, such as a double carbon rear wing, an Inconel exhaust system, carbon ceramic brakes with ABS, airbags, a chrono instrument cluster, a tire monitoring system, a hydraulic lift system, as well as a complete infotainment system, and a semi-automatic transversal paddle shift gearbox with super synchronization, which could shift in 30 milliseconds. 30 milliseconds all the way back in 2008. They were pulling out such phenomenal numbers all the way back then, and this just showed the engineering capability of Koenigsegg all the way back in 2008. And not to mention that this thing is just a party piece on the outside, but an engineering marvel on the inside, and this showed what Koenigsegg was capable of. And not to mention the exterior is just completely beautiful on its own. Would you take this silver carbon fiber CCXR Trevita or a normal carbon fiber Koenigsegg? Let me know in the comments below. And moving on to the third and final CCXR of the lineup, and that is this, the CCXR Special Edition, of which only 2 were ever made across the entire world. And this boasted the finest carbon fiber bodywork to date, and it had a completely unique and larger front splitter with side winglets and louvres on the front wheels, and a double aero carbon rear wing as well, and also a new touchscreen infotainment system with sat nav and a G-force meter. And obviously it introduced the F1 paddle shift system, which has carried on all the way from the CCXR Special Edition to the Ageras, to the Regera, to the Jesko, and to the Gemera, and it will still go on. But nevertheless, it is only 2 built, making it as rare as the CCXR Trevita. It's got the same 4.8 liter twin supercharged flex fuel V8, which ran on ethanol, and it could boast 1018 brake horsepower, and it could generate 1060 Newton meters of torque. And it's got a 0 to 62 mile an hour time of 2.9 seconds, and it's got a top speed without the rear wing, of course, of over 250 miles an hour or over 400 kilometers an hour. So thereby bidding farewell to the CCXR lineup was the Special Edition. Obviously, it introduced the F1 paddle shift system that on its own marked a huge engineering marvel achievement for Koenigsegg. Obviously, dihedral Synchro-helix doors, as you guys can see, and a Targa top as well. Anyways, a proper awesome farewell to the CCXR lineup. And well guys, that marks the end of episode 6 and the end of the CCXR lineup, i.e. the CCXR, the CCXR edition, the CCXR Trevita, and the CCXR Special Edition. Which of these would you go for? I mean, they on their own, they were engineering marvels, environmental approach as well, 1000 plus horsepower to the rear wheels, 1018 brake horsepower, of course a manual transmission as well included in the CCXR and the CCXR edition. But nevertheless guys, engineering marvels and legends of the automotive industry. Anyways, what do you guys think? Which of these would you pick? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks a lot for watching guys. Remember to hit that sub button and click the bell to ensure that you don't miss out on any future videos. Thanks a lot for watching guys. See ya. Stay tuned for episode 7.